Side 4 starts with Way of the World, another underrated Genesis song from the Phil Collins era in my opinion. Much like Tell Me Why, this is also a protest song that deals with the effects of war as well as natural disasters, and those man-made. The music and beat of this song do remind me a bit of Michael Jackson's The Way You Make Me Feel, which, considering how he too has done a few protesty songs like Man in the Mirror, Earth Song, and They Don't Really Care About Us, I'm not really all that surprised, to be honest. Anyway, the verses begins by questioning if you can take away pain by wiping tears, or if normal men can hide fears or not if you give them weapons and guns. And it also mentions Mother Nature sitting with a loaded gun, letting us wonder if she plans to kill some people or if she intends to take her own life, which which is pretty deep and also pretty dark and intense to think about. If Mother Earth could commit suicide, what would happen to us? Then the bridge comes along to ask us, why is the sky blue or red, and what will happen if they meet? Well, clearly what will happen is that the sky will turn purple and will give us purple haze and purple rain, obviously. But then, of course, the chorus comes along, and it is without a doubt emotional. In fact, to call it emotional could easily be an understatement. In it, Phil kind of tells us how what is right, what's wrong, there's weak and there's strong, and in the end, it's simply the way of the world. That's how it's got to be. And the instrumental middle section part kind of carries on that sense of emotion and kind of prior dire need to help others, to help the earth itself, kind of emphasized by Tony's synths and Mike's kind of also subdued guitar riffs. And as it all fades away, it kind of carries on that ambiguity, like, can this earth be saved? Can humanity be saved? It's honestly something to think about, and it's just the way of the world. And overall, the way this song goes is utterly beautiful. It's, like I said, it's an underrated song, and I'm kind of surprised that this too doesn't get as much talk or appreciation as other equally unknown Genesis songs. Then there's Since I Lost You. At first, this may sound like yet another breakup song and whatnot, but when you actually hear about the actual backstory behind this particular track, it takes on a whole new meaning. On the 20th of March that year, in 91, the then 4-year-old son of famous guitarist Eric Clapton, whose name was Connor, apparently fell out of the window of the 53rd floor of a building in Manhattan. And apparently a good chunk of the lyrics here were based around and inspired by an actual conversation between Eric and Phil in the light of this tragic incident. I couldn't actually find any proper source to confirm which particular lines were actually lifted from this particular conversation, but reading them through, it wouldn't exactly surprise me. But that said, this is a very tragic, if not very depressing song that deals with the feelings and heartaches that one would naturally go through when losing a loved one, be it a close relative or a close friend. And honestly, as I've said before, this is one of the many songs that I think many people can relate to. We'll feel these feelings of shock and horror and sadness and sorrow when we learn about an old friend who's passed away, or even with a relative, like be a parent, a grandparent, an uncle, an aunt, or even someone younger, like a child in this case, it can leave one so distraught. And honestly, it's such a very hard topic to tackle, and to base it on a real life death. It's really challenging, and somehow they managed to pull it off, and I'd kind of give kudos to that. And so side 4 and the album comes to a conclusion with the other 10-minute epic, Fading Lights. After all that came and gone, both the light and the dark, the humorous and the dramatic, this 70-plus minute adventure has found its worthy conclusion, its worthy finale. Beginning with a soaring synth of ambience, along with a ploppy drum machine, Phil recalls how some memories may differ and fade, but they will still remain within us in some way or another. Plus, sometimes how stories still need to reach their final ending. And then the chorus comes in, and it may quite sound familiar to some of you. In fact, it's quite similar to ripples from the Trick of the Tail album. And that might have been intentional on their part, considering both their similar themes of nostalgia and youth and the gradual losing of innocence. Then about 3.5 minutes in, we transition from the calm, soothing ambience to a rocking instrumental break with the keyboard and guitar solos, calling to mind some of their past albums from the 70s, like Wind and Wuthering and Then There Were Three, to the 80s, like Juke, Abacab, and the Mama album. And then it all returns back into that soothing opening synth melody with Phil singing out some last lines before eventually closes and fades out, like the title would suggest. It's honestly a perfect finale to this kind of album. And honestly, as the last song to the last album with Phil Collins taking the lead, it's honestly a good song to go out on. And if this were to be the last album by Genesis at all, it would have been perfect. It would have been fine as that. And honestly, with all that's been said and done, We Can't Dance is honestly, it's honestly a surprisingly decent album. Much like Invisible Touch, it's gotten a bit more flack than it ever needed to be. Sure, not all of it's perfect. It's not as grandiose and operatic as The Lambs Lies Down on Broadway, or even, say, Foxtrot, or Selling England by the Pound, or Nursery Crime. But it's not meant to be exactly like those. It's still meant to be its own thing, and it's still meant to be kind of a farewell from Phil to the other band members, or at least it seems that way. And like I said, it would have been great if this was the last Genesis album. But of course, 6 years afterwards, as soon as Phil left in '96, Tony Banks and Mike Rutherford would do one more Genesis album with a new singer, the frontman of Stiltskin, Ray Wilson. But I'll get into that another day. But for now, if you're a fan of Genesis, or you like old 80s, 90s rock music, I'd say give this one a chance. It has some great highlights, like Dreaming While You Sleep, Driving the Last Spike, and even some of the more softer poppy songs like Never a Time or Hold On to My Heart. They still have some merit to them. It has a good balance of both dark and dramatic, and with light and humorous. It's also varied with the various themes it has, and the commentary on it is honestly very varied enough that you get some ideas. It's not just about just a bunch of love songs by Phil Collins, but some of it still tells some stories in one way or another. And all in all, We Can't Dance is a very underrated album, and I think it deserves much love. You don't have to dance to it, you just have to appreciate it, and that's all. Next time, though, Halloween's right around the corner, and no doubt some kids will be out trick-or-treating dressed in various costumes, maybe, considering the pandemic. But for me, though, I need to close out this season with something more interesting, something more worthy. Next week, we'll be celebrating the 50th anniversary of a Pink Floyd album.